Hey everybody, 13 News Now meteorologist Rochelle Peart and Craig Moeller with you to talk about the tropics. Ooh. Here it is, Wednesday, September 4th. We're still about 6 or 7 days from the peak climatologically of the Atlantic hurricane season, and look at this action going on.
Yeah, definitely looking like peak hurricane season out there. We have 5 areas to watch right now, and we have 3 named storms going on right now. One just upgraded earlier this morning, Craig.
Yeah, you see these different areas, and we'll focus on these. Of course, we're going to spend most of the time talking about Dorian and its impacts to Hampton roads, but here's what else is going on. You see, number 1, that's Dorian. Number 2, that is Fernand. And how about that? Very close to the coast right now in Mexico. It's not a very powerful storm.
Yeah, they do have some tropical storm warnings up for parts of the Mexican coastline, but Fernand is going to be weakening as we move through the next day or so into almost nothing.
We'll show you that track in just a moment. Right behind Rochelle here, that's number 3, another area that's likely to develop. However, that's moving away, so we're not concerned with 3. Over on the other side of the pond, a couple areas also with some interest. Number 4 is our new storm.
Yeah, that's Gabrielle, tropical storm right now, expected to sustain that tropical storm force out winds, but also we're watching number 5, Craig. And what's this red mean?
This is a wave that's going to come off the African coast. This means that it is very likely to develop over the next 5 days as it moves to the west. Chances for development around 70%, 70 to 80% over the coming days. This is an area favorable for development, and we are getting into the Cape Verde, season now, where we look for storms and waves to come off the African coast and then move across the Atlantic. Some of these really turn into powerful hurricanes, so we'll need to watch that one. That could become Umberto. So, yeah, I got to work on trilling that R a little bit, but Umberto. So we're going to watch that. All right, so there's Gabrielle, or Fernand rather, and you mentioned some warnings up, but this is a weaker system.
Yeah, so that's a tropical storm warning that's up right now. We have those tropical storm force winds of 50 miles per hour, weakening by Thursday morning, 30 miles per hour tropical depression.
You know, the one thing with these systems that come into Mexico, even as tropical storms, they can be big rainmakers. So we'll need to watch for flash flooding for some of the higher mountainous areas once you come into Mexico. But as far as the wind strength, that one's not all that impressive. Now we get to Gabrielle, and this one moving off to the northwest. You can see the island of Bermuda way out here. This thing, no threat to us.
Yeah, absolutely not. But we did see that it is going to be on a somewhat strengthening path. Winds right now 40 miles per hour. By Monday morning, 60 miles per hour. But again, like Craig mentioned, no issue at all.
Yeah, it's far out there, and again, with it that far north, it'll get picked up and kind of turned off to the north eventually into the North Atlantic. Shipping interests obviously want to pay close attention to that. Now we come to Dorian, and this is the one that we're going to be watching in the near term. And finally, some good news for folks down at the Bahamas. I mean, Abaco hit so hard, and then Grand Bahama Island, it just sat there for like 24 to 36 hours, hardly moving. It is now moving north-northwest at 8 miles per hour. Guess what? This one's going to parallel the coast and then make a run towards our area.
Yeah, it's going to flirt with the coast. We've been watching this forecast pretty good over the past few days since the weekend, saying it was, trending more to staying out to see the center of it. But we are still going to have those impacts along the Florida coastline, Jacksonville, Daytona Beach. We had some issues also in West Palm Beach. And this is going to go up through Georgia, the Carolinas, and even affect areas of Virginia where we do have tropical alerts from Florida all the way through Virginia.
You take a look here along the coast. Rain bands have been reaching the Florida coastline. The worst of the system has been offshore, though. Also, there's going to be concerns with surge because, the winds around these systems, pooling the water up. So we're looking at this potential issue with the storm surges for the Carolina coast. There's that turn you were mentioning, Rochelle.
Yeah, so we're watching this. So far, Dorian has not made landfall in the United States. Now, that's still not out of the realm of possibility, but we see the center of that cone, for the most part, does stay off of land. But that doesn't mean it can't track a little bit farther off to the north and west, but also it can track a little bit farther to the south and east as well. So still a little bit of uncertainty, but overall, the center of that cone has been pretty steady since about the weekend, staying and moving potentially over parts of the southern Outer Banks.
Yeah, we're going to be watching right here, Ocracoke Island and Hatteras, pretty much very close to that center line. So it could be a little farther to the southeast, keeping the exact center off. Could be over the Pamlico Sound if it shifts a little bit back. Either way, we're looking at our conditions here in Hampton Roads getting a lot worse over the coming days, and we're going to talk about that. The other thing, Rochelle, is with some of these systems, they make that turn, start to get some drier air coming in. We've got a frontal boundary there. When that happens, the system starts to take on extratropical characteristics, and that wind field, where typically with the tropical system, it's pretty well defined, it may expand a bit on the exit. So that's one of the concerns we're looking at Friday. That wind field could expand, giving us some prolonged tropical storm force winds into Friday afternoon and maybe even early evening. It does accelerate off.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about why that's such a good thing compared to some past storms. All right, here's the forecast for the wind field. You can see the hurricane force winds in red, the tropical storm force winds extending out much farther in yellow. And Rochelle, you can go ahead and talk about this as it makes that turn.
Yeah. So we're
along the coast.
So we're watching, and we just saw how a lot of areas into Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and potentially as far north as Southside Hampton Roads could deal with this yellow or those tropical storm force winds. Now that's at least 39 miles per hour. We can get those winds, and especially the gusts, to be even stronger than that, something typical of what we would see during maybe a severe thunderstorm, where those winds, or at least the gusts, get up to 57, 58 miles per hour. So that's going to be an issue for multiple reasons. We're
going to be seeing those higher wind gusts, especially near the water and down along the outer banks. In fact, we could have some hurricane force gusts a little farther to the south. The better chances for hurricane force sustained winds right down around Hatteras and Buxton. But again, a little variation in this track could bring those stronger winds closer to Hampton Roads. And we do anticipate, right now we're looking at winds probably in that 30 to maybe 45 or even 50 mile per hour range, sustain some higher gusts possible. It's going to be interesting, though, as this tracks through there, at some point there's going to be a pretty sharp cutoff, and we'll talk more about that as we go. Let's get into our future cast. And today, Rochelle, a good day to take care of stuff around your property.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about this last night. I was like, today is the perfect day. Any outdoor furniture, nail that down, bring what you can inside. Of course, gas grills, keep those outdoors, but everything you can bring inside, definitely do that, because once these winds start cranking up, Craig, we could have projectiles around some of our neighborhoods. So you want to do as best as you can to make sure to avoid or minimize that potential.
You think about kids' toys, maybe they've got some stuff that they leave out in the backyard, little things that could take flight. We're going to see the winds picking up as we go Thursday night and into Friday. You can see the winds, and these are the sustained winds with this meter that we have up there through Wednesday. Not a big deal. South winds generally 5 to 10. It's going to be partly sunny today. It will be hot and humid. Temperatures up around 89. It'll feel like it's in the 90s today, so we do have some heat to contend with. As we go overnight and early tomorrow, there's a chance we could see a few showers. Not so much directly an impact from Dorian, but some showers kind of preceding it. Maybe some of those outer bands starting to build in down to the south. Now, as we go through the overnight Thursday, that's where things start to get more interesting around here. And there comes the tropical rain with Dorian. You see that by early Friday.
Yeah, and you can see these little arrows. These are indicating some of those winds, that counterclockwise flow that we get around low pressure. That is what hurricanes come with. These are moving a lot faster than when we started off Futurecast, Craig, and that's some of those stronger winds pushing in. We could be talking about rain, lightning. What about our risk for severe weather with this?
Well, a lot of times when you have the tropical systems interacting with land, you can get isolated tornadoes. In this particular case, that threat appears pretty minimal for most of the immediate area. Down across North Carolina, there's a chance that we could see a few isolated tornadoes, and we won't rule out the possibility we could see a little spin up, because if you get a heavier band and it's racing along, you can get them, but it appears the greater threat for that probably a little bit farther to the south. You don't typically see much lightning with these, but man, these bands come whipping around, and obviously with sustained winds now getting into the upper 20s to say mid 30 range, and those wind gusts building as we go through the morning hours, we're going to see the potential for some limbs to come down, some tree issues into power lines, power outages, all those things expected to start ramping up late Thursday night and into early Friday. Here's where that core of that heavy rain is early Friday. Again, Hampton Roads, south side, North Carolina, expecting the most. Where exactly those heaviest bands set up will determine who sees how much. But in general, 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 inches possible. Locally higher amounts could be in the mix as well.
And we do have alerts for storm surge. We have those tropical alerts in place, so we're going to be watching a few different things, and this heavy rain just compounding on top of that. So we've seen a few frames here on Futurecast with the oranges, the reds, those warmer colors, indicating those pockets, or not even pockets, but large swaths of heavier rainfall.
So that moves through. We start to see the winds shifting around towards noon, and then during the afternoon, we'll see a little bit more of a northwesterly component. At that point, we're going to see the potential for sound side flooding, and this becomes a big deal where the water gets pushed from the west and the northwest towards the sound side of the Outer Banks. We get a lot of issues with that down along the Albemarle Sound and the Outer Banks. This could be, and we do expect this to be, a big deal Friday afternoon and Friday evening. Eventually, things improve Friday night. I want to get into the more specific details in the timeline. Jeff Lawson, our chief meteorologist, we spent some time talking yesterday, kind of timing out all of the impacts and what we think. So we'll run through this, Rochelle. Thursday morning, again, Dorian near the South Carolina coast. You showed that track a moment ago. A little breezy around Hampton roads, but really not too bad early Thursday.
Yeah, so if you can, maybe you can't get everything done today. Thursday morning, maybe try and get up a little bit earlier, especially for our zones down toward the south, down toward the Outer Banks, mainland Dare County. Try to get those things done as early as possible, but we are going to have some time Thursday morning before things really start to quickly ramping up later on in the day.
And I'll say this, a lot of folks have been asking travel plans. Maybe you had hoped to get out Friday or whatever. Friday is going to be a very raw situation with the wind, the high tides. You know, there's going to be potential for flooding and the rain. If you can get out Thursday, especially early Thursday, if you're traveling, that would be your last best time to try to get out, because I expect things to go downhill overnight Thursday. So Dorian gets near Wilmington, North Carolina. Heavy rain, potential for moderate flooding. So overnight, Thursday night, we have a high tide coming Sewell's Point around 3:30 in the morning, Friday morning. Okay, so during that overnight period, at that point, moderate tidal flooding, a level at Sewell's Point, which is the measuring gauge for Norfolk, right around 5, maybe 5.3 feet, something like that. That would be a moderate flood level. So we're going to be watching for that. The winds picking up down around the Outer Banks. We could see some of those hurricane force gusts.
Yeah, and we were talking about the wind field and how the tropical storm force winds extend away from that center. So a hurricane, not just a point, but it's an area. So even though the center of the storm is near Wilmington, like Craig mentioned, we're going to start to get those gusts into Hampton roads and potentially some of those into the peninsula, especially heading into Friday.
Yeah, looking at the overnight and early Friday, we're probably looking at winds in the neighborhood of 20 to maybe 30 or 40 miles per hour. Some higher gusts near the water, potentially Hampton roads. The stronger stuff Thursday night, early Friday, down for the southern Outer Banks. Now here we go. Friday morning, Dorian near Hatteras. Heavy rain, moderate flooding expected just from the rain alone. There will be a sharp cutoff at some point where those heavier bands really produce flooding rains, and then areas not too far away may not get as much. So that's one of those things you just need to stay tuned for updates. Yeah,
and we'll be on all Friday morning. We'll have overnight stuff going on as well. But as Trey mentioned, moderate flooding, but then we're going to start to see those winds, sustained winds, 50 to 80 miles per hour, gusts even higher than that for the Outer Banks, and then 30 to 50 mile per hour winds for Hampton roads.
And we'll stress, yeah, that is for the Outer Banks, really the southern Outer Banks, those stronger winds. But we'll be watching across North Carolina, and all these numbers based on what we're looking at as we are here at the middle of the week. We've got a couple days, the models will get clearer, and we will tweak these numbers. Now, for the Outer Banks, Friday afternoon, major sound side flooding. I mentioned that the winds northwest driving that sound side flooding. Could still see some hurricane force gusts, southern part of the Outer Banks, potentially. We'll see. At some point, the winds will be dying down, but you take a look at Hampton roads in Virginia here during the afternoon. Even though Dorian is off to the northeast of Hatteras at this point, we're still looking at winds 35 to 55 miles per hour, and we could see some of those higher gusts near the Virginia Capes and near the water.
Yeah, so that's why we're saying, get everything done as early as you can, even for those who live outside of the southern Outer Banks, outside of North Carolina, because Virginia, we're going to be dealing with this through a good portion of Friday as well. It's not just going to be down to our south. We're going to be dealing with this across the entire area.
This moderate to major tidal flooding, this is our greatest concern. The afternoon high tide taking place around 4 o'clock Friday afternoon. At that point, we could see 6.4 feet or so at Sewell's Point. We wanted to talk about how this lines up to some classic situations that we've dealt with, some of the larger tides or higher tides that we've seen in recent history. Hurricane Isabel back in '03. This was the one, the water's so high, those koi ponds that they have out at Nauticus, all those were overtaken. The koi, some of the fish just took off for the water. They swam right out. Interesting note, the younger fish kind of flew the coop, so to speak. The younger koi got out. The older koi kind of settled at the bottom. Well, when the water receded, those older koi survived. They never knew what happened to the younger ones. It took off. And you can imagine the Elizabeth River, a little dirty of an environment for the koi. So we'll see. But anyway, what we're going to see, not nearly that high. That was 7.9 feet. Hurricane Irene back in 2011, 7.56 feet. And as we go this week, Friday, we expect that high tide probably around 6.4, maybe 6.5. And that'll be more than what we saw with Hermine a couple years ago. So it's going to rank, Rochelle. It's going to be. Rochelle, you mentioned the tropical storm watch that's posted for the Virginia part of the viewing area. We've got the hurricane watch down to the south. The good news in all of this is that the weekend does look a lot better.
Yeah, and even into early next week, 30-20% chances. So we are going to have some time to dry out once this moves out. But we do have storm mode alert days for both Thursday and Friday. And again, that's for Virginia and our North Carolina counties. We've got everybody in this, as we just saw. We have those alerts for the entire area pretty much.
Very important you stay up to date on the latest with this. We will keep you updated. We'll have more video updates on Facebook, on YouTube, and on 13newsnow.com. Stay aware of the situation, know your zone, and know the threats to your area, and stay tuned to 13 News Now.